52 BC. The first hammer stopped. A heartbeat later, so did every other. Silence rolled across the hillside, not because the work was finished, because every Roman had turned toward the western forest. Nothing moved, not the trees, not the banners, not even the wind. Then, the birds exploded into the sky. Hundreds of them. They didn't circle. They fled. A faint vibration reached the unfinished rampart. Another, stronger, loose stones began sliding down the earthworks. A hammer slipped from someone's hand. Nobody bent to pick it up. Dust climbed above the trees, not drifting, advancing. Slowly, an entire horizon began to disappear behind it. Then came the rider. His horse burst from the forest at full speed. Foam covered its neck. Blood streaked one front leg. It stumbled, recovered, stumbled again. Still, it never slowed. The rider crossed the Roman camp without looking left or right. He threw himself from the saddle before the horse had even stopped moving. The tent flap opened. He vanished inside. The horse remained standing. One breath, another, its legs folded beneath it. It collapsed into the dirt. Not a single Roman moved. Thousands of soldiers. One silent tent. The canvas had never looked so small. Moments later, the flap opened again. Two officers stepped outside. One slowly removed his helmet. The other stared toward the western hills. Neither spoke. Across the valley, a horn echoed from Alesia. Another answered. Then another. Warriors climbed onto the walls. Some pointed toward the dust. Others embraced. Many laughed. They weren't looking at Rome anymore. They were looking at salvation. The dust continued to grow. First came the banners, then the spear points, then thousands of shields catching the afternoon sun. The line stretched farther than the valley itself. It didn't look like an army. It looked like another horizon. Someone whispered, "The relief army." No officer corrected him. No officer needed to. For 19 days, Rome had been building a prison around Alesia. This afternoon, another army had arrived to build one around Rome. The cheering from Alesia spread like fire. Tower to tower, wall to wall, it rolled across the fortress until every Gallic warrior was looking west. Not toward the Romans, toward the army they had spent weeks praying for. Some raised their spears, others pounded their shields. A few climbed onto the parapets, just to see the endless line stretching across the horizon. Hope has a sound. That afternoon, it echoed through Alesia. The Roman camp answered with silence. No cheers, no orders, no movement. Thousands of men stood exactly where they were, watching a single tent. The messenger still hadn't emerged. Neither had Caesar. The entire army seemed to be holding the same breath. The canvas shifted. The messenger stepped out first. Mud covered his boots almost to the knee. His breathing hadn't settled. He looked back once, saluted, then disappeared into the crowd without saying a word. Only then, Julius Caesar appeared. No polished armor, no helmet, only a weathered crimson cloak. Its hem dark with dust. He ignored the western hills completely. Ignored the cheering from Alesia. Ignored the officers waiting for orders. Instead, he walked toward an unfinished trench, climbed down into it, scooped up a handful of earth, rubbed it slowly between his fingers. The chief engineer hurried over. He pointed toward Alesia, then toward the relief army. His hands moved quickly. Distances, elevations, timber, time. Caesar never interrupted. When the engineer finished, Caesar lowered one finger into the dirt. He drew a single curved line. The engineer nodded, until he realized where the line was going. It wasn't surrounding Alesia. It curved behind the Roman camp. He frowned. Caesar extended it farther, following the shape of the hills. The engineer slowly looked over his shoulder. There was nothing there. No city, no fortress, no enemy, only open ground. He looked back at Caesar, waiting for an explanation. None came. Caesar simply tapped the line once, then stepped away. The engineer remained frozen for several seconds. Around him, the cheering from Alesia only grew louder. Behind him, the relief army kept descending into the valley. Ahead of him, an unfinished Roman wall still demanded thousands of hours of work. And now, Caesar wanted another one. The order didn't spread with trumpets. It spread with whispers. One officer leaned toward another. A centurion crossed to the next work party. An engineer pointed toward the empty hills. Nobody shouted. The words simply drifted across the camp. Another wall. The first soldiers thought they had misheard. The second group asked no questions. By the third, silence returned. Not confusion, calculation. Every Roman was trying to fit the order inside the battlefield, unfolding before him. None of them could. A single centurion bent down, picked up his hammer. The first strike echoed across the hillside. One hammer, then another, then 10, then hundreds. Within moments, the valley was alive again. Thousands of hammers, driving fresh stakes into the earth. Not toward Alesia, away from it. The laughter came almost immediately. One Gallic warrior leaned over the wall, pretending to swing an invisible shovel. The men beside him burst into laughter. Others joined in. Soon, entire sections of the fortress were laughing at the Romans below. Across the valley, even some warriors from the relief army stopped to watch. An army surrounded on both sides. Still digging. It looked absurd. It looked desperate. It looked exactly like defeat. Only one man on the battlefield wasn't watching the laughter. Caesar's eyes never left the growing line of timber stretching across the empty hillside, as though the battle had already begun, long before the first sword had been drawn. Night settled over the valley. Not gently. Axes answered the darkness first, then hammers, then the slow crash of another tree disappearing into the forest. The battlefield refused to sleep. The western hills glowed with thousands of campfires. One flame became 10. 10 became 100. Soon, the entire horizon burned, not to provide warmth, to be seen. Every Roman who looked west understood the message immediately. We are here. We are many. Tomorrow, we come. The Romans answered with no message at all. No songs drifted through the camp. No speeches. No celebration. Only work. The steady rhythm of iron striking wood. The sound never changed. One hammer, another, then another, as if an entire army had become a single heartbeat. The unfinished wall stretched farther into the darkness. Torches moved along it like drifting stars. From a distance, the Romans didn't look like soldiers anymore. They looked like craftsmen racing against sunrise. The relief army watched from the hills. No arrows, no cavalry, no probing attacks, just thousands of silent faces, trying to understand why trapped men were still building. Caesar walked the line alone. No escort, no banner, only a torch. He stopped beside a newly finished tower, looked toward the northern ridge, then climbed down without a word. The nearest engineer frowned. Moments later, the tower came apart. Fresh timber hit the ground. Hours of work disappeared before midnight. No one argued. The men simply carried the beams farther north and started again. The wall wasn't growing randomly. It was searching for something hidden inside the landscape. A ridge, a valley, a narrow approach. From the ground, nothing made sense. From above, every small adjustment quietly reshaped the battlefield. Far beyond the Roman lines, a Gallic commander rode slowly along the ridge. He stopped every few hundred paces, studying the construction below. The second wall confused him. It wasn't protecting supplies. It wasn't protecting a retreat. It curved with the hills, ignoring the shortest route, ignoring the easiest ground, ignoring everything a commander was supposed to value. He watched for nearly an hour, then turned away. No orders followed. Understanding hadn't come with observation. Only more questions. Near midnight, another rider emerged from the darkness. This one arrived without urgency. No exhausted horse, no shouting. He handed Caesar a small wax tablet. The general read it once, folded it shut, returned it. The scout nodded, mounted again, gone before anyone nearby could ask where he had come from. The exchange lasted less than 10 heartbeats. Yet within minutes, entire work parties shifted farther north. Another trench changed direction. Another tower moved. The battlefield kept evolving, one quiet decision at a time. A cold wind swept across the valley. The campfires leaned with it. For a single moment, both Roman walls caught the firelight together. The first wall, holding Alesia inside. The second wall, holding the unknown outside. Between them, Rome, one army, one narrow strip of earth, two enemies. Just before dawn, the wind died. The fires faded into ash. Then, The mist arrived, not from the hills, from the valley floor itself. It crept through the ditches, wrapped itself around the sharpened stakes, climbed the watchtowers. One by one, the battlefield disappeared. The first wall vanished, then the second, then Alesia itself. Only the horns remained. One low note, somewhere inside the fog. Then another, closer, then another. The valley wasn't empty anymore. It had simply hidden its army. The battle had finally come. The first shapes emerged without a sound. No battle cry, no charging horses, only shadows, separating themselves from the mist. 1, then 10, then hundreds. The relief army didn't appear all at once. It assembled itself, as if the valley were creating soldiers from fog. The front ranks carried no ladders, no siege towers, only bundles of timber lashed together with rope. Marcus frowned, then another Roman noticed, then another. The realization spread silently along the wall. They weren't coming to climb. Not yet. They were coming for the ground itself. The first bundle disappeared into the ditch. A hollow thud echoed through the valley. Then another. Then 20 more. Weeks of digging began disappearing beneath minutes of labor. The sharpened stakes vanished one layer at a time. The ditch grew shallower with every heartbeat. Rome had spent 19 days making the ground impossible. The Gauls intended to make it ordinary again. No command came from Caesar. None was needed. Roman archers stepped onto the towers together. Bows rose, strings tightened. For a brief moment, the entire battlefield held its breath. Then the sky turned black. Thousands of arrows climbed into the mist. They vanished, long before anyone understood. The fog answered, not with echoes, with screams. The front ranks staggered. The men behind never slowed. Bundles of timber kept moving. The dead simply became another obstacle to step over. The ditch continued disappearing. One layer, then another. The Romans weren't watching a defense collapse. They were watching time disappear. Every bundle thrown into that trench erased another hour of Roman labor. Every hour erased moved the battle closer. A crack shattered the morning. The first ladder struck the wall. Another followed, then another. Iron hooks bit into fresh timber. Ropes snapped tight. The quiet rhythm of hammers vanished beneath the violence of wood against wood. The wall had stopped being a construction site. It had become a battlefield. Bronze flashed above the parapet. A Gallic warrior reached the top. A Roman shield exploded into him. He vanished backward before his feet touched the wall. Another helmet appeared. Another shield answered. There was no duel, no heroic clash, only a relentless exchange of weight. Push, fall, replace, push again, beyond the ladders, beyond the arrows, beyond the men already dying. Another army remained perfectly still. Thousands of fresh warriors waited behind the assault. Spears upright, standards unmoving. Not one had entered the battle. They were watching, waiting, saving their strength. Caesar was watching them too. Not the ladders, not the breach, not even the wounded returning from the wall. His eyes never left the untouched reserve, as though the battle unfolding in front of him was only the first move. Then something strange happened. The relief army stopped looking at the Romans. Its commanders began looking at each other. Messengers started riding. Standards shifted. One formation slowed. Another continued. The attack hadn't failed, but for the first time, it had stopped flowing. Somewhere inside the fog, the battlefield had asked a question. Neither army had answered it yet. The pressure on the Roman wall kept growing. Not because more warriors arrived, because fewer were leaving. Every ladder became a doorway. Every doorway demanded another shield. The relief army wasn't trying to overwhelm the wall with brilliance, only with weight. Enough men, enough time, enough pressure. Sooner or later, something would break. Nothing did. Not yet. The line bent. It groaned. It bled. But it never broke. Where one Roman disappeared, another was already there. Fresh shield, fresh spear, fresh breath. The Gauls couldn't see where they were coming from, only that they never seemed to stop. From the western ridge, it looked impossible. The Romans had arrived with a finite army. The commanders knew roughly how many legions stood below. So why did every breach close before it widened? Why did every exhausted cohort seem to return moments later, looking as though it had never fought? No messenger could answer, because no messenger could see behind the second wall. Hidden beneath its shadow, an entire road had come alive, not wide enough for wagons, not impressive enough for maps, just a strip of packed earth, running behind the defenses, invisible from every Gallic position. Cohorts vanished behind one tower, only to appear far away where the fighting had become fiercest. No marching columns, no clouds of dust, only fresh shields, arriving exactly where tired ones disappeared. The wall wasn't hiding soldiers, it was hiding movement. Across the battlefield, a Gallic commander narrowed his eyes. Something wasn't right. The Romans weren't reinforcing the breach. They were replacing it. There was a difference. One bought time, the other ignored it. He turned sharply toward the rear. A messenger galloped away. Another followed. Within moments, standards began shifting across the relief army. Searching, trying to find the Roman reserve, trying to discover where those fresh cohorts were coming from. The second wall answered with silence. The mist slowly lifted. One tower emerged, then another. The hidden roads remained invisible. Only the results could be seen. A section under pressure, suddenly stiffened. Another, recovered. A third, never collapsed at all. From the Gallic side, it looked as though the Roman wall healed itself. The assault continued. Ladders slammed against timber. Hooks bit into fresh wood. Men climbed. Men fell. The rhythm never changed, but something else did. The attacks no longer struck together. One formation reached the wall too early. Another too late. A third found the ditch still unfinished. The battlefield had begun pulling the assault apart. Not with swords, with distance, with timing, with ground. Caesar finally climbed the nearest tower. Not to inspire anyone, not to be seen. From its highest platform, the entire valley opened beneath him. Smoke drifted through the low ground. The relief army stretched across the western hills. Alesia still watched from the east. For the first time that morning, both enemies were visible together. Caesar never looked at the fighting. His eyes moved across the terrain instead. The ridges, the valleys, the narrow approaches, the places where thousands of warriors would eventually have to become hundreds. He wasn't watching the battle. He was watching where the battle would go next. Then, almost too quietly to notice, he nodded. A single standard shifted behind the second wall. Nothing happened. At least, nothing the Gauls could see. Hidden roads stirred. Fresh cohorts stepped into motion. The battlefield changed again. Still, the relief army never saw it happen. It only felt the result. Somewhere ahead, another Roman shield appeared, and another breach disappeared. The Gallic commanders felt it before they understood it. Every report sounded the same. The northern assault had stalled. The western ladders had gained nothing. The southern attacks demanded reinforcements. Each messenger arrived carrying a different battlefield. No two stories matched. That was the first warning. The second came from the standards. One commander ordered an advance. Another signaled a withdrawal. A third redirected his reserve. From the Roman towers, the movements looked almost random. The relief army had stopped acting like one force. It had become several battles, all fighting on the same ground. Caesar never raised his voice. He simply watched. Somewhere below, another messenger climbed the tower. He spoke quickly, pointed toward the northern ridge, then toward the center. Caesar followed the line with his eyes. Not the men, the ground between them. For several long moments, he said nothing. Then he lowered one hand. The messenger vanished. No speech, no dramatic command. Just another quiet decision, lost beneath the sound of war. Moments later, the Roman line shifted. Barely, one cohort moved left, another disappeared behind the second wall. A third emerged where no Gallic commander expected it. The change looked insignificant. It wasn't. The relief army struck empty ground. The Romans had already moved. From above, the battlefield no longer looked like chaos. It looked like water. Every Gallic attack flowed toward the weakest point it could find. Every Roman defense quietly redirected it. The trenches nudged it. The towers narrowed it. The hidden roads outran it. The second wall concealed it. Nothing stopped the attack. Everything shaped it. Far across the valley, the commanders of Alesia watched the same battle. They saw Roman banners, Roman towers, Roman shields. What they couldn't see were the roads behind the second wall. Every time the defenders seemed exhausted, fresh soldiers appeared. Every time a breach seemed close, it vanished from the walls of Alesia. It looked impossible, as though the Roman army had learned how to multiply. The relief commander made his decision. His reserve stepped forward, not cautiously, not in scattered groups. The entire formation advanced together. Thousands of fresh warriors, untouched, rested. Their shields gleamed beneath the afternoon sun. Even the Romans on the wall noticed. The earth answered before anyone spoke. A slow, heavy, relentless vibration. The final blow was coming. No Roman trumpet sounded. No reserve appeared. No cavalry moved. The second wall remained strangely quiet. The silence spread through the Gallic ranks. The closer they marched, the stranger it felt. Where was Rome's answer? Where was Caesar's last reserve? Had they finally reached the end? The commanders believed they had. They lowered their spears. The reserve broke into a run. The distance collapsed. 300 paces, 200, 100. Still, nothing. Then, behind the second wall, a crimson standard rose into the sky. Only one. No speech followed. No roar. No dramatic gesture. Just a single banner, lifting above the timber. Every Roman trumpet answered together. The sound didn't echo. It rolled across the towers, across the trenches, across both walls, across the entire valley. For one suspended heartbeat, the battlefield stopped feeling like a battlefield. It felt like something waking up. The reserve charged, not wildly, not recklessly, like a wave gathering height before it broke. Thousands of shields moved as one. Spears lowered, boots hammered the earth. The western ridge disappeared beneath them. From the Roman wall, it looked unstoppable. The Gallic commanders smiled. For the first time that day, every piece had arrived exactly where it belonged. The first assault had fixed the Romans in place. The warriors from Alesia were pressing from behind. Now, fresh men would smash through the center. One final blow, one final push, one final breach. The crimson standard never moved. It simply remained above the second wall. Waiting, the reserve reached the outer ditch. The first ranks crossed it. The second followed. Then the third. Momentum built with every step. Nothing stood in front of them now. The Roman wall looked tired. Its defenders looked exhausted. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Then, the earth behind the second wall began to move. Not with an explosion, not with a charge, with order. Rows of Roman shields rose above the timber. One line, then another, then another. The wall wasn't empty. It had never been empty. It had been hiding an army. The Gallic reserve slowed, only slightly. It was enough. Their front ranks kept advancing. The rear kept pushing. The formation compressed. Spears tangled. Shields collided. Momentum became confusion. The hidden gates opened. Fresh Roman cohorts poured onto the battlefield. Not from one place, from everywhere. A unit emerged beside the northern tower. Another appeared near the valley road. A third stepped out behind a line of sharpened stakes. To the Gauls, it felt impossible. The second wall wasn't releasing soldiers. It was creating them. A commander on the western ridge pulled hard on his horse. He stared at the earthworks, then back toward the Roman line, then toward the earthworks again. His face didn't show fear, only disbelief. He finally understood what he had been looking at for 2 days. It hadn't been another wall. It had been a curtain. Everything behind it had been invisible. The first Roman reserve struck, not head-on, into the flank. Shield met shield. The sound echoed across the valley like splitting timber. The Gallic front twisted sideways. The men behind never saw why. They kept pushing forward. The men ahead had nowhere left to go. Within moments, thousands of warriors were no longer fighting Rome. They were fighting their own momentum. From the highest tower, the battlefield finally revealed itself. Every trench, every tower, every hidden road, every reserve, every one of them pointed toward this exact stretch of ground. Nothing had happened by chance. The battlefield hadn't trapped the Gauls. It had guided them, step by step, choice by choice, until every road led here. Across the valley, the laughter from Alesia was gone. The cheering had stopped. Even the horns had fallen silent. For the first time since the relief army appeared, the fortress wasn't watching a rescue anymore. It was watching an army disappear. Behind the second wall, the Gallic line buckled, not all at once. One formation drifted sideways, another slowed, a third stopped completely. From the Roman towers, the change was almost invisible. From the western ridge, it was catastrophic. The reserve had lost its shape. A horn cried out, then another. The signals clashed across the battlefield. One commander ordered an advance, another demanded a retreat, a third called for reinforcements that no longer existed. The battlefield swallowed every command. Smoke carried the echoes away. By the time the orders arrived, the ground beneath the soldiers had already changed. The Roman reserve never chased. It kept advancing. No charge, no rush, just another measured advance. The same rhythm that had built the wall now pushed the enemy backward. It didn't feel like an attack. It felt like the earth itself, slowly moving west, far behind the relief army. Bronze flashed, not swords, helmets, then horses. The Roman cavalry appeared beyond the ridgeline, not charging, spreading. One squadron crossed the northern valley, another disappeared behind the southern hills, a third rode straight toward the only open road. From the battlefield, it looked harmless. From above, it looked like a door quietly closing. A Gallic rider burst toward the rear. His horse slipped in the churned earth, recovered, ran again. He reached the nearest commander, pointed wildly toward the western hills. The commander turned. For the first time that day, he wasn't looking at Rome. He was looking for a way home. There wasn't one. The valleys were gone. Roman cavalry stood across every obvious escape. The ridges offered only narrow paths. Behind them, more Roman horsemen were already climbing. The battlefield had become smaller again, not because the walls had moved, because every road had disappeared. The first warriors noticed. One lowered his shield, only for a moment, long enough to look behind him. The man beside him did the same. Then another, then another. The attack slowed without a single Roman touching it. No commander had ordered the hesitation. The battlefield had. Caesar never looked toward the cavalry. He already knew where they would be. His eyes remained fixed on the Gallic standards. One disappeared into the smoke. Another turned the wrong direction. A third stopped moving altogether. Standards don't panic. Men carrying them do. The Roman trumpets fell silent. No more orders. No more signals. The battle no longer needed them. Every cohort already knew its road. Every tower already knew its target. Every reserve already knew where it would appear next. 19 days of preparation had become one afternoon of certainty. Then, the first Gallic warrior turned and ran, not because he had been defeated, because he could finally see the battlefield. He saw Roman shields closing from one side, Roman cavalry from the other, walls behind him, trenches beneath him, smoke ahead. For the first time, he understood what Caesar had understood days earlier. There had never been an escape. There had only been the illusion of one. The retreat didn't begin with a trumpet. It began with a glance. One warrior looked over his shoulder. Then another. Then another. Within moments, thousands of eyes were searching for the same thing. A road. They found walls. The northern valley. Blocked. The southern ridge. Roman cavalry. The western road. Gone. Every direction that had promised escape only hours earlier now ended beneath Roman standards. No commander had ordered it. The battlefield had. The first Gallic standard disappeared. Not captured, dropped. Its bearer vanished beneath the crowd before another hand could reach it. Then a second standard fell. Then a third. Across the battlefield, commands dissolved into fragments. Without standards, formations became crowds. Without formations, an army became thousands of frightened men, making thousands of different decisions. All at once, the Roman line never accelerated. It didn't need to. Shield, step, the same patient rhythm that had raised two walls from bare earth, now drove an army backward. No shouting, no celebration, only pressure, constant, unavoidable. Smoke drifted across the valley. For a few moments, neither side could see the other. Only the sound remained. Shields colliding, horses breathing, boots slipping through churned mud. Somewhere inside the smoke, another Gallic horn sounded. No one answered it. When the wind finally carried the smoke away, the battlefield had changed again. The ladders were abandoned. The ditches were filled with broken timber. Shields floated in muddy water. Spears stood upright where no hands remained to hold them. The assault had disappeared. Only its remains were left behind. Far across the western ridge, the retreat finally broke. Not into formation, into flight. Warriors threw away shields that had protected them for years. Helmets disappeared into the grass. Spears were abandoned where they fell. Every extra pound slowed a man trying to outrun cavalry. Every discarded weapon marked another place where hope had ended. From the walls of Alesia, nobody cheered anymore. The warriors stood motionless, watching the relief army dissolve. Hours earlier, those same hills had promised rescue. Now, they promised nothing at all. The gates of Alesia remained closed. No final attack came. No desperate charge. The fortress had understood what the battlefield already knew. The army beyond the walls wasn't coming back. The Roman trumpets stayed silent. Victory didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with absence. The horn stopped. The ladders stopped. The shouting stopped. One sound disappeared after another, until only the wind remained. Late that afternoon, the gates of Alesia opened. Not suddenly, slowly, almost reluctantly. One rider emerged, alone. No escort, no banner, no army. Vercingetorix crossed the valley at a walking pace. The battlefield that had taken tens of thousands of lives offered him a clear path. Broken ladders lined the road. Abandoned shields lay half-buried in the mud. The second wall stood behind them all. Scarred, blackened, still standing. He stopped before Caesar. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Vercingetorix looked past the Roman commander, toward the second wall. His eyes lingered there, longer than anywhere else. Perhaps he was searching for the moment everything had gone wrong. Perhaps he had already found it. Slowly, he climbed down from his horse, unbuckled his sword, placed it on the ground, then his dagger. One step backward, his head lowered. No speech, no bargain, no final plea. The battlefield had already spoken for both of them. As the sun disappeared behind the western hills, long shadows stretched across the earthworks. For the first time in weeks, the hammers were silent. The trenches were empty. The towers stood alone. To anyone arriving the next morning, they would look like ordinary Roman fortifications. Nothing more. They would never know. That one impossible order had quietly changed the fate of a republic. History would remember the surrender. It would remember Julius Caesar. Almost no one would remember the order that won the battle. It wasn't advance, it wasn't attack, it was simply build another wall.